To the September 26th Village Board Work Session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, we don't have to take attendance, actually. We don't have any legislative session this evening. I was ready for you to start calling our names.
Oh, well, I'll have a surprise later, but just not now.
Oh, well, I can hardly wait.
You can wait.
All right. Okay, so who has announcements for us this week? Sir, yes.
Sure.
Surprise.
So yeah, it's all about the music. Tomorrow night will be the Thursday night organ groove at the Elks Lodge, and it's more than just an organ groove; it's organ donor groove, and we're asking people to come and register and give us information if you want to be an organ donor. We think that would be an interesting way to pass along. Oh, so it's all here.
You can take it off my list.
So anyway, the idea here is to get folks to register, and if God forbid something did happen to you, your healthy organs could save another person's life. So we're going to sort of combine all that together with our organ groove tomorrow night. Mike DePazzo will be the saxophone player along with John Doty and our fine organist Paul Connors. Saturday night will be really exciting. Jazz at the Lodge will be presenting Les Hommes de Cave. That's Ann Goulian will be singing, and it's jazz standard. Starts at 7:30. Please reach out to me on Facebook if you're interested in reserving a table. We expect a good crowd, and it'll be a lot of fun. So that's the Organ Groove tomorrow night at 7:30 at the Elks Lodge, and then also Saturday night for Jazz at the Lodge with Les Hommes de Cave. That's also at 7:30. Thank you.
I just remembered. Am I on, Tom? Oh, okay. Just remembered, I was looking at my notes. Mary Knoll Sisters are having their fall festival. It's supposed to be 70 degrees on Saturday, so please come out. It is at Mary Knoll Sisters on 20 Pines Bridge, and it should be a lot of fun, 11 to 4 o'clock on Saturday. So come out and enjoy.
Anybody else have announcements?
Not Sunday.
I have not yet. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Good evening, everyone. So this Sunday, La Comunidad Hispana, which is the branch of the Ossining Padre Hispanos, took on the task of organizing Ossining's first Hispanic Heritage Day Festival, and it's being held from 12 noon to 7 p.m. in downtown Ossining. And from what I hear and see, it should be an awesome day of food and music and dance. So I encourage everyone, if you are around, to stop by and grab a meal and do some dancing, or just, come support.
Any announcements from you?
No announcements.
Then I'll just tag on to what Trustee Codman was commenting on about Organ Donor Day. This is the third year that the town and village of Ossining have worked with the organization to try and encourage folks to donate organs. New York State is still ranked number 50 out of 50 states in our organ donation rate. That's bad. That's very, very bad. And we don't like being the bottom of the list. And so Ossining is doing its part in signing folks up each year. We will have this year volunteers who either themselves or family members have been recipients of organs. And so they are well versed in being able to address any questions or concerns that folks have in signing up. And the sign up is actually super easy, just the back of this form. And well, if you are not yet an organ donor, the easiest way to do it if you're a driver is to just click the box when you get your driver's license. If you're registering to vote, thank you to Sandy Galiff. She pushed for the initiative for your voter registration to include an organ donation opportunity on the voter registration form. You can go online and look to be an organ donor. But if you want to help Ossining in our competition, then you have to actually sign this little card and date it for October 10th. And we want to have a really good showing here in the community. But of course, anything that gets folks to sign up and be organ donors is the goal of the day. So, Madam manager, you've been you just got back into town after your exciting conference. So
I did. It was a phenomenal time.
yeah,
And I learned a little bit about what Trustee Codman is interested in, which is solar power, and got some contacts there.
Not interested in it?
What's
I
that?
feel left out.
Well, no,
wow.
I was reading it before you were. That's all.
He's just
They're
reading the
all
job longer.
interested.
Yes.
Not that other people don't care.
John has been the one that's been going, where are we? But it was really great to talk with other communities, especially communities that have the diversity that we have, to learn what they're doing and how they're engaging all of their population, regardless of the language that they speak. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing a lot of those ideas with you. We also had an opportunity to meet with several vendors on parking meters and, other operational items. There was a really wide variety of vendors there, so it was exciting to do that. But just the energy and the passion and, being with like people to share concerns and share ideas and passions. So I went to 4 different seminars. They were like half-day seminars, and I'm looking forward to sharing a lot of the ideas there. It's about innovative thinking and things like that. So I think there's a lot that I'll be able to share with all of you, and I thank you for allowing me to go.
We look forward to hearing what you've learned and bringing back for us. Thanks. So, this evening we are pleased to be able to welcome the chair of the Ethics Committee to talk with us about an update to the Code of Ethics. Corporation Counsel Kahan, do you want to introduce this topic for us?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, members of the board. Peter Madison, our Board of Ethics Chair, is here to talk a little about the Board of Ethics and also to go over what I've denominated as Proposed Local Law 10 of 2018. Peter, the floor is yours.
I suppose I could sit at the table, or I
But
could
be
stand
welcome
here
to
and
sit
let
at the
use
table if you would
podium.
like.
You can
Welcome
sit wherever
to.
you want.
There you go.
I'm not delivering a summation or anything like that.
Get that microphone closer to you. There you go. Nope. The other way. Make it tall.
No, no.
The button.
No. The
The
button.
button has to be out.
Press the button. Yeah.
It's counterintuitive.
Okay. Am I on? Yes.
You are, sir.
Okay. So, well, I think you all know what the Board of Ethics does, what we are here for, and basically it's just to make recommendations to you about complaints that people make alleging violations of the Code of Ethics. And we don't make any determinations, we just make recommendations and you make the determinations. And we've actually been pretty busy, a lot busier than I expected it to be. But the reason I'm here tonight is that I'm assuming, by the way, that this meeting is a public meeting.
It is.
So I'm not going to give any details, certainly not going to give any names, but I'm not even going to give enough detail so that somebody who was partially in the know could figure out who and what I'm talking about. But the recommendation we're making is to section 17-4H, which is future employment. This is the 17.4 is conduct, and 17.4 subsection H is conduct which is prohibited when people leave the employ of the village and move on. And a former employee of the village wound up being involved on the other side of an issue that was in front of one of the village boards, not the village board, but in front of one of the committees or boards of the village, and was called on it by a citizen. And we went around and around on it, and ultimately reached a decision which we have forwarded to you. But during the while we were discussing this, it became apparent to us that the section that was being alleged as having been broken, it read that future employment, he or she shall not, after the termination of service or employment with such municipality, appear before any board or agency of the Village of Ossining in relation to any case. And the use of just the word appear struck us as being a little narrow, and it gave the I wouldn't say defendant. I'm still thinking
The former
like that.
employee, yes.
Yeah. It gave the former employee wiggle room to make a very well-argued case that this wasn't an appearance, and so we, in looking at it, decided, well, the word appear wasn't defined, but in addition to that, what the employee was doing was sufficient to really look bad. And even though it didn't result in any discernible harm to either the village or to the people on the other side of the controversy, at the same time, one of the things that we are supposed to do is to avoid the appearance of impropriety. And so we amended, well, we didn't amend it, we are recommending that you amend this section so that it's not just an appearance, but anybody who has anything to do with a matter that he or she has left any fingerprints on while a member or an employee of the village has to stay away from it. And so it reads, instead of just appear, it says, he or she shall not, after the termination of service or employment with such municipality, appear, participate, or render advice or other services with respect to any matter before any board or agency in relation to any case, proceeding, or application in which he or she personally participated or which was under his or her active consideration during the period of his or her term, service, or employment. So we tried to cover those bases so that they can't have anything to do with anything that they touched while they were here. And that is the recommendation we're making. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions and comments from the board?
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you for obviously you deliberated, and obviously the argument that came from the other side was that it was so vague that, and I mean, I think you've really wrapped your arms around it here, which is that we can't have somebody who's worked for the village in a certain capacity and then all of a sudden, use that institutional knowledge that they have on the other side of something, and that could provide them an unfair advantage, actually,
yeah.
in any business dealings that are going on. So I'm certainly pleased with this, and I would support the change. Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to, Village Code is a living document, and it's when circumstances arise that help us recognize that it really could be better or should be better. Then it's our legislative obligation to figure out how to make it better. And one of the really beneficial things we get from all the boards and committees is that you're looking at one piece of village government, and you're looking at it very carefully and thoughtfully. And I appreciate that you're bringing this recommendation to us for consideration. It's certainly something that we had discussed with advice of counsel on a larger scale regarding the entire circumstance that brought you to this point. And so I thank you very much. The Board of Ethics was reconstituted and strengthened in the last year, and I'm really pleased that you all are able to come together and make thoughtful decisions and recommendations.
Thank you. I know full well the extent to which it was reconstituted because I was the new guy and I wound up the most seniority to be the chairman.
Well, thank you very much. So then, Corporation Counsel, we would call for a public hearing at next week's meeting?
That would be correct.
So we'll have the public hearing in an upcoming October meeting.
Right.
But does anybody from the Board of Ethics have to be there for the public hearing, or
They do not have
Okay.
to. It's not necessary.
Okay, not necessary. Would it be desirable, whether necessary or not?
It's really your call because it's a public hearing, so if it's a
Dialogue,
question of
right.
the people, generally not, but you're always welcome to
Yeah.
attend.
Yes, Peter, it's one of those things. Public hearings happen at the very beginning of the meeting. So you know that unless there's a really high profile controversial public hearing happening before that public hearing, it's going to happen at 7:30. Some people just like to see through the process of what they've been working on, so you'd be more than welcome. Although I don't anticipate that we need to call on you. It's pretty straightforward, and I know that Stuart and all of us are pretty well versed on it. I doubt there's going to be a huge outcry one way or the other.
Okay, in that case, I'll probably skip it rather than show up and pitch a hissy fit and walk out.
Well, thank you very much for your work on this,
Okay.
and we appreciate
for your
the
time.
improvement.
Thank you.
All right. We've invited Chief Sylvester to join us, if appropriate, for the conversation, particularly about cats, because there's been the email going back and forth. So he is here.
we recognize him as-
I just realized we hadn't emailed that piece of the invitation. Thank you. So we started with local law 10. Now we're moving on to local law 4. Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan, would you like to introduce? Yes, please join us. Chief Sylvester will be joining us.
All right, Chief. This is the animal portion of our meeting. And we last discussed local law 4 in July, at which time I had provided the board with the comments from the Cat Protection Council of Westchester. I know some of their folks are here tonight, and thank you very much. Also some of the comments they had with regard to the proposal that had been put forth. I also provided the board with copies of the ordinances that are currently in existence in both Haverstraw and West Haverstraw, as well as the proposals from the CPCW regarding the trap, neuter, and return program in the village, and basically, removing certain of conducting the program in the village, and a community trap and remove proposal. I've been in contact fairly frequently with Ms. Hamilton on various issues tonight, and what I'm going to talk about now specifically deals with the proposed local law. What I'd like to just indicate is my intention is to have for this board at the next work session, which would be, I think, October 10, a revision to the proposed local law based upon a lot of the comments that I got from the CPCW folks. There were certain issues with regard to locations of some of the feeding shelters and some of the other issues that they raised. Particularly, there is a concern that they may have individuals who would be dissuaded from assisting us with the trapping program by some of the things that were in the ordinance. The Haverstraw ordinance is a bit broader than the one that I had proposed. Mine was, I shouldn't say mine, but the one for the village was based more upon Maplewood, New Jersey's ordinance, which is fairly restrictive in terms of where things can be done. But with my discussions with Ms. Garber and Ms. Hamilton, I think we'll be able to formulate something. I think, but part of this will also involve whether this board wants to have some recognition of CPCW as the organization that is sort of acting as an umbrella to do the trapping program within the village for purposes of educating, for purposes of assisting, obviously dealing through the police and dealing through the animal control officer. I think that part of it is very important. That has to be discussed because there have been, a few rough patches recently with regard to that in terms of how it's been operating and how it's been happening in terms of timing. I think we recognize that there probably needs to be something done vis-a-vis the feral cats. These folks are the ones who are essentially doing the trapping and going out and doing that. Part of the issue we have is that the SPCA only provides their services one day a week. I believe it's Mondays. So a lot of the work is done over the weekend. You know, we've been having correspondence as to how that can be done and what the best way would be to do that. As I said, what I'm looking at is having something for this board, which will not be hugely different from local law 4 that was presented back in July, but will take into consideration much of what the CPCW folks have said and have asked, and to try to, you know, involve them in the process to that extent, because they're the ones who are doing this. They're the ones who are out there. So that's my hope. I know that the chief just walked out because I know there are other issues that relate to you know, this local law, and also issues that relate to the trapping program and the SPCA that he's more involved with, although I get copied on a lot of those emails. That's where we are on local law 4. We do still have, I'll point out, we do still have an existing agreement with Annie Rodriguez, who I know is here. Annie, good evening. And that agreement goes until November 4th, if I remember. It's something, and it would be November 5, which is Monday that week. That agreement has been in place for a number of months and has worked fine in terms of what's done with regard to those particular locations and the work that, you know, Annie is doing there. So hopefully we can, you know, expand on that. But now that the chief is back,
Can I just ask one question before Chief Sylvester weighs in on some of his involvement? Right. You made reference to the Cat Protection Council. The intention wouldn't be to specify a particular name of an organization in the code.
No, in fact, I think the way it's written up is that there would be some organization. I would not, because if for some reason CPCW ceases to exist, we're sort of...
We don't want to update the code 10 years ago when there's a different name
Right.
for a different group of volunteers.
Right.
Okay.
So the answer would be it would refer to, you know, some group or whatever, but it would not have a specific identity there. That's correct. And that may also then be, there may be a separate policy that would be adopted so that we could follow
Right.
through that.
So then that brings the question of operationally, how do we formalize the relationship? And I think that's where the chief may be able to step in, formalize the relationship of who's doing the trap neuter return with the village and how is that determined in advance. And I see Debbie nodding her head as well, because that has, up until this point, largely been handled by the village manager's office, and we're sort of redirecting the process for this, given that animal control is actually in the police department. So trying to streamline the communication, but at the same time, we're working with new volunteers and having to figure out a new process. So Chief Sylvester, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. So, you know, with regard to who's going to be trapping, I mean, that's obviously a critical portion of this. One of the issues we're having right now is that we have folks that are trapping cats, taking them to the SPCA. The SPCA, for whatever reason, has been authorizing service for these cats, and the only person left out of the equation has been the village, who's actually paying the bill. So what's most important for my department is that we in fact know who it is that's actually performing the work, and also that we're made aware of what that work is before any expenditures are authorized. So as much as folks enjoy volunteering and they're passionate about this activity, where there's village funds involved, unless the board so chooses through this ordinance to deputize them somehow or give them a position with authority to expend funds, there has to be some control put in place for animal control to be able to have visibility. So our objective here was that, and in order to get some control over this activity, because we really don't know who's out there trapping and where and when, is that for right now, they've got to contact the animal control officer, and he's there between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. Monday to Friday. And during that time, what we've asked him to do once they call is to actually go out to those colonies and see where they are, to ensure that the cats are in fact within the village territory, that they're cats that need to be trapped or for whatever reason. And then he's to give authorization to the SPCA for those activities to happen. We have not had that yet. We have, however, got some communication that volunteers are either going and now paying out of pocket to have cats treated, and then through the attorney that they've, I believe, retained, is saying that they're now expecting reimbursement. So obviously, there's a lot of confusion as to how this process should go down. So I'm optimistic that hopefully this ordinance can narrow that. The other things that I think are going to be really important parts of this is that this specifies the only place on public property that those cat shelters should be kept are the 7 of them that had originally started this discussion off of Brandreth Street. we have at least one complaint recently about houses that, believe it or not, went to Homeland Security because somebody thought it was some sort of suspicious package, and it was in the Kilbrook. We went out there, and our animal control officer recognized it as a cat shelter, and we were able to explain that to people. But there's that, and we've had a couple of calls about a number of cat shelters that are right now placed at the bottom of the Sing Sing Kill Greenway, and there's a number of other locations where we haven't discussed or authorized for cat shelters to be placed, which brings me to back to the point of we don't, in fact, know who's doing these activities. So this does seem to be the core group of folks that have some communication network in place. But I certainly believe that there's other people that are involved in this activity that we're going to need to reach out to. And then I think that one of the conflicts that may come up is whether or not those folks choose to join the Cat Protection Council of Westchester, or if they still want to be on their own, and then we'll be preventing them from trapping cats. I mean, ultimately, it's my understanding we all agree that the objective of this project is to trap the cats, have them spayed or neutered, return them to wherever it is that they are, with the eventual objective of not having the feral cat issue anymore. Albeit some of these cats seem to be lasting far longer than what's expected for the average feral cat based on the documentation and research we've had. So, you know, our primary objective here is to get a hold of a system, primarily for financial concerns, but also to be able to have some accountability for who's in fact doing work, even if volunteer in any way associated with the village.
I have two questions here, and I'm trying to sort of unbundle this. So with all the conversations we had, my recollection is that we were supposed to get names of people who are legitimately the people collecting the cats. So it doesn't seem like names were given. Names weren't given, reimbursement should not be occurring. Secondly, my recollection is, and you can correct me, secondly, my recollection is that if we have a contract with any vendor, the vendor cannot arbitrarily say, well, okay, let me do it, and then after the fact, I mean, what vendor do we work with? What contract do we have with anybody where we pay after the fact and not in advance?
Well, that's the conversation we're having with the SPCA right now, because they're expecting payment on procedures that were never authorized, and all of the documentation they say they have for how they've contacted us. You know, I don't want to go into too much detail because it's a contract issue, but you know,
it's a public contract. We vote on this for a year. It says what you're supposed to do. I'm not blaming you. I'm basically saying the SPCA should not have accepted this, should not have allowed this to go on. It's not like you people aren't reachable, because you are. So it's a very, one thing happens, but this sounds like it's more than one. So there are two problems with this. One is that we did have a conversation that people sign up that they are the people that will be doing whatever it is, you know, with a list of what they're going to do, names, etc., and that would be followed up on. So, and while I don't think that's easy to do, people leave, I mean, I think that's bureaucratic, you know, adjustments that we have to make, and I think it's more work. I get that, but it doesn't seem like it was done in this case or at all. Maybe it was, but not with enough people. And second, because I thought there was a whole conversation in one evening about this. And secondly, a contract's a contract. SPCA we've been working with them for years. I just don't get how, you know, this happened. You know, I'm looking at you because I thought that the contract was actually with the village when we passed the budget. Okay. That's why I'm not looking at you, because I think it's transactional for you, but there is a vendor contractual agreement, and people can't walk into any place in our village and say, the village manager said I could charge this, I'll do it, and then get reimbursed. I mean, for any product or any service. So I'm trying to, what's happening here?
Well, I'm sorry, so two different scenarios we have. The original scenario was that people were walking in and the SPCA wasn't doing it, and then the folks expecting reimbursement. The SPCA was in fact doing it and sending us a bill.
No, I get that.
And when we got the packet of bills, I called and said, you know, who authorized this? And they said, you did. I said, no. So then they went down a list of other people that they believed to authorize it and methods that it was authorized, and some of those methods didn't even exist, like certain people having voicemail that they claim to have left voicemails with that we don't even have in our infrastructure. Then once that was cut off and we said, look, we're going to have to discuss these bills, and that's something that we still have to resolve, Then the SPCA stopped providing services without payment up front from the folks that are volunteering to trap cats. So folks began trapping cats and paying out of pocket for this to happen with the belief that they'd get reimbursement. But we've been pretty clear that they have to contact the police department, speak with the animal control officer first. There was one occasion where they had called and he was unavailable, so I gave authorization for a particular number of cats to be treated. That on that occasion, that bill was processed. The following week after that, we received a communication after hours when we had specifically said, look, this is the time he leaves. And we can't change the animal control officer's schedule to account for feral cats. He's got standard business hours. They've been that way for quite some time. So in that week, nobody was authorized, and we then got communication that folks intend to seek reimbursement for trapping cats that we can't verify their location or the time and date of or who had actually done it because we were left out of it.
How much money are we talking about?
It varies depending on the amount of service, but it's anywhere from $35 to $55 for a spay or neuter, and at times we're charged for other small fees in addition to that. I believe that the bill that was outstanding from January through July with no communication was $1,600. That's in addition to a sizable contract that we have with them annually.
The contract is how much? 36,000.
I think it's 36, 38.
Yeah, we have one of the biggest contracts in the county. It's not for cities, but for villages. Okay.
Debbie, do you have anything that we should be aware of from your experience?
Well, not
working
really.
with the volunteers or with the situation?
Jamie Hoffman was the one originally that was tracking that and taking that, and then I think Kevin said it's more appropriately placed in police, and it is because police handle animal control. So I'm totally supportive of everything that the chief is saying at this point. We were taken by surprise when the bill came in because we have not been handling any calls or any advice, because if a call comes into our office, we immediately refer it over to the police and say this is something that they're handling and you need to work through them. So I think in this one instance we were taken aback, and I think that we are looking for ways that we can solve it so it doesn't happen again. But I think that the conversations that the chief has had with the SPCA is going to put them on notice that the system that we all agreed to is something that we all believe in, and it needs to be followed. So I'm not sure exactly when we find different houses and feeding stations that are not designated through this organization, we have to remove them and let people know that it's not permitted.
So what I'm hearing is a couple of different things that are happening. When we're talking about the shelters and the feeding stations, that's for managing an existing colony, presumably of cats that have been spayed, neutered, and vaccinated. They've already been trapped, neutered, and returned. What we're talking about now, though, is the actual trapping, bringing to the SPCA, and then the returning, and the expense involved with the trapping, and that there's been something of a breakdown in communication in getting approval for the cats once they're trapped to then have the work done at the SPCA. And it had been going on for a number of years, and obviously in the last 10 months we've had a lot more attention to it. There are a lot of volunteers who are stepping up. In the past, my understanding was there were particular individuals that the village had on a list. I mean, this kind of predates a lot of the folks who are taking over now.
At that point, it was with the village manager's office, and even
Yeah.
animal control had no visibility of it.
Right.
So when in 2013 I found my first cat shelter, and the animal control officer had no idea what it was.
Right. So it's important that we have people who actually work with animal control involved with this. Absolutely. I think we all agree with that. I'm wondering if there isn't a way, though, recognizing that these are volunteers, and we very much want to see feral cats in the community to be trapped and neutered and vaccinated. That's better for the community. It's not just better for the cats, it's better for the village if that's happening. And it's great if it can be done by volunteers rather than our staff time. Volunteers, the 7 to 3 Monday to Friday is very predictable and dependable, but at the same time we're talking about volunteers. I'm wondering if there's a way to have communication that can happen beyond that, at 4 o'clock on a Friday or on a Saturday.
One of the, I certainly can start authorizing overtime for people to come in, and I don't say that facetiously. What I mean is that where we give time frames, people often say, well, that doesn't work for me then. So I don't know that we're going to be able to find a time that the animal control officer works that is going to work for everybody. And I don't know that changing his schedule to accommodate cat trapping is necessarily the most efficient way to do this. However, but I say that for this reason. The most important part of this entire transaction for the animal control officer is that he's able to go out and see the locations. Because one of the concerns we have is that people say the cats are coming from here, coming from there. We want him to be able to go see where these locations are for a few reasons. Number one, this would prevent people from placing cat shelters in large colonies in places where they're not supposed to be. So if you're trapping cats in a particular place, we'd like him to go out so that he's got knowledge of what's going on in those locations while it happens. Otherwise, we end up with these calls saying, animal control, you authorized this. How did this happen here? And he says, well, I just took a call and trusted somebody.
Well, is the trapping happening in the shelters? Doesn't the trapping happen in a particular? I've had things described to me.
We don't know because so far we haven't gone out to meet with the people when they've found cats to trap. If it's the board's prerogative that we just sign off on it and we do it by phone or email, by all means. I mean,
It's
we can
not
do
that.
that.
It's not that. It's just I'm trying to figure out how we can maximize the number of cats that are being trapped and neutered, and without, no, it's not reasonable to say that we're going to have our animal control officer available 7 days a week at everyone's beck and call. That's not reasonable at all. But the question is there a way for the volunteers probably are working Monday to Friday during those hours themselves. So if they're doing the trapping, it's probably happening in the evenings or the weekends, or it's being set up in the evening, it's being checked on a Saturday at certain times of the day or whatever. It's been described to me, but I really don't understand it well enough to be able to advocate for it. Please.
So we basically, the issue here, and I agree with the chief here that we need to be able to observe what's happening. If we're going to authorize these activities, we need to have somebody who's part of the village police, the police department is part of animal control and all that stuff. So we need to somehow align ourselves administratively so we can observe what's happening, observe the places where the cats are being trapped, so we can verify that that's where they are and that's what's going on, and we're able to understand internally, okay, what's happening with the shelters, where the trapping is happening, all that other stuff's going on. And so I really feel as though this is sort of an administrative thing. We need to figure it out. I think that everybody needs to sit down in a room and talk about who's available when, how can we work this out, how can we do it, who's available when. I think this is scheduling, but I feel very strongly that the village needs to be able to verify this information so we can approve the payments, so we can make that stuff happen, so that everybody's on board. And I don't know whether the problem is, the history here is that this thing has been handled by the village manager's office and not by animal control. So this is all brand new. This is we got a clean slate here. So we really have an opportunity, I think, to make this work and get the benefit of the volunteer group that's willing to do this. So that's my feeling. And I just, rather than kind of hash this out, in a meeting publicly, which is important too as well. I don't take anything away from that. But I think there are some administrative considerations that need to happen here so that we can accomplish the things that the chief wants to get done. So.
I just want to add, it's not that it can only happen between 7 and 3. There's certainly accommodations can be made where there's emergencies or unique sorts of circumstances. My point was just that I don't think it would be appropriate to make a sort of open the door to every Friday having cat appointments at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or, then we would have to start saying, well, what time do people come home? So now it's late at night. But certainly it's not that we're so strict that this is the only time it can ever happen. But where we've set standards, nobody has really come through during those times at all. I mean, if there was a phone call between those times, like everything else, I'm not sure that there's anything in our entire book that we do the way the book says, because when somebody comes on Monday and says, I need fingerprints, we really don't send them away and say, Wednesday's the day anymore. We say, hang on, I'll go find you a detective, and today we'll help you with that. When somebody says, I need a car seat done, we don't say, come back tomorrow. We find somebody that can help you with it, and we do it. So we make as many accommodations as we can. I'm simply stating that to this point, there hasn't been a lot of give back other than this is what we need, and it needs to get done. We're going to need some cooperation from this group, and some of the people I suspect that are going there aren't actually part of this group. and that's another issue.
Yeah, and I would just follow up and just say, you know, we need to identify who the people are that are part of the, you know, the Cat Protection Council, the people that have volunteered to do this, and make sure that we know who those individuals are that are deputized, we can call whatever we want to call it, to interact with animal control and with the police department to get these things happening. So
Did the volunteers sign something?
I think this is all brand new. I don't think there's anything been developed here, and that's why I'm saying this is a greenfield situation where, you know, there was this handshake that happened years ago with the village manager's office, and now we've got to completely, you know, we got to hopefully we're not reinventing the wheel, but we're getting ourselves to a point where we're going to start over again.
So one of the things that in the conversation, as far as I understand the history, particularly with the bills coming to your office, is there would you like to take over like the whole, like would you like to shift it over to?
We've already done that.
Oh, you've already done it? Okay, cool. All right.
The whole conversation we had about. So there's really a third, yeah. So there's like a third issue, and that is, which I totally missed, sorry. It's the people who are not a part of the organization we've been speaking to, totally different people who just go in because they're citizens or they're concerned, and you're suggesting that they too are asking for reimbursements? So did something,
Well,
I think when you said signed, I assumed you meant signed at the SPCA something with their name and all that, because now they're asking for reimbursement, so there must be names associated somewhere.
There are names associated with all those services they provided. Some of them are familiar names to us, but I also know that a few weeks back we received an email from people unassociated with this group who just said, you know what, I'd like to start trapping cats and I'm going to do it. So now that people are aware of this, they said it's a great idea and I'd love to help, and they're helping without getting in line.
So
Right.
some of this is operational, administrative, whatever term we want to use, and that needs to be clarified so that we're not suddenly receiving $1,600 bills that weren't authorized. But for just the purposes of Local Law 4, which is how we started this conversation, do we have what we need in Local Law 4 to be able to move forward and then figure out the administrative clarification? And perhaps the administrative clarification needs to be just specific guidelines for the people who are volunteering and individuals who are volunteering, not just an organization, and that states if you are going to be, you know, seeking to have the village reimburse you for trapping cats, you need to contact animal control between these hours
Well,
so
that's
that they
one
can
of the issues
schedule.
with this ordinance, is that it specifically says that you'd have to be a part of the group, correct? Whatever
It
group
stops
is so
that.
designated.
That's what he's bringing it up.
So,
So,
yeah.
so do we need it to be a group, or does it have to be groups or individuals who are
Registered.
registered with the
Well,
village? Yes.
Then we're opening it up to
initially
everyone,
there
right?
had been- There had been some discussion about having some sort of,
Training.
I hate to use another registry, but basically that sort of thing where you would know who these folks are.
Yeah.
I mean, either under the auspices of the CPCW or in somewhere else, so that we know who they are. We know who's getting approved. We know who's able to then go and you know, bring the cats into the SPCA. So there has to be some means that we can know who those folks are. If they're not working through the CPCW, then there has to be some means they have to register with us. And again, I don't like to use the term register. We have to know who they are. But they can't simply just say, well, I want to go out and trap, because there are ways of doing things. If they, you know, we could just have folks who are out doing this and don't know what they're doing. And that's far more problematic, I think, than anything else. One of the reasons to use the assistance of an organization like the CPCW is because they can educate those folks. Even if they don't want to be a member of the organization, they can at least train them to do those kind of things, which I think is the way to do it. But knowing who they are is is critical.
But that could all be part of the sign up, the registration, the approval, whatever we're calling it.
My only other concern with this ordinance is, you know, just from a logistical perspective, is this indicates that there's one colony that the village is going to acknowledge and allow to continue. I think there has to be some conversation or acknowledgement of the fact that we have colonies and structures on public property in various locations. And what started this entire conversation was the removal of cat shelters. And I suspect that regardless of what that drives me crazy when people say irregardless.
Yes.
Let's go back a minute here. Regardless of what ordinance we pass, there's an emotional aspect to this, and I think that we have to address the fact that people have these cat colonies there, and I'm in no way saying that they should remain, because I think that some of them are really in inappropriate places, but there needs to be something done to address that, because otherwise we're going to be sitting right back here having the same conversation in a few months.
Where are we with the
Well, we did,
colonies
in
on
fact,
public
we
land?
did get from the CPCW, and I'd exchanged it earlier, they had given us a community cat trap and remove proposal as to what to basically do. It's fairly expensive. Excuse me, I didn't mean to say inexpensive. It's fairly expensive because the sanctuary fee alone is $350 per cat. Then there's the transportation, because the sanctuary is not in this area. So you would be transporting the cat. 2 people would need to do that. You'd have to take, it's basically $50 per cat to trap, $150 per person round trip to the Good Shepherd location. There's a mileage fee. It can become an awfully expensive proposition to do that. This is at least from the proposal that was sent, after Trustee Codman and I met with the folks from the CPCW. We asked them for this proposal. The cat sanctuary is located in Delmar, Maryland. So it's not even like.
Did you want to say something, Trustee Herrera?
I did. I just wanted to take the opportunity to kind of listen a little bit more. First of all, I really want to thank just all the volunteers, whether they're part of the Cat Protection Council of Westchester or not, for volunteering and kind of doing the service in Ossining. I thank the chief for actually trying to organize us better on how we're going to deal with this, but really find a long-term plan for when we're not here again, which is kind of inevitable if we don't actually address that. So thank you for that. I did want to just the village budget that allocates the 30 grand or whatever it is. I don't think that's all for TNR. I think that's like for animal.
So there's I think $36,000 or $38,000 allocated, and that deals with all animals that we go to the SPCA with, and they've given us a breakdown of why they think that's a relevant number. So one of the things that we've tried to do to keep that under control, people love to see dogs on Facebook with police officers, but in reality, that initiative was started holding dogs at headquarters and letting them stay in the police station, because it costs us, I believe, $150 for every animal we drop off at the SPCA. So the 30 or 40 dogs that didn't go there last year was a significant savings to the village in keeping that contract down. So it doesn't just, I believe the TNR program is above and beyond the $36,000 that we pay them.
That's correct.
Thank you for that. I am a little troubled and concerned about just, I don't want to call it an oversight, because we don't really know what happened and why they chose to authorize stuff that they weren't authorized to do. But I'm pretty confident that, that'll, be looked into, because they've been pretty good partners with us. And we want to continue that. But back to what Mayor Garrity said, I think it's more of an education opportunity really for the public to know, regardless of how we go with local law 4 or its revisions. This is our procedure. This is how it's going to be enforced. I know that in the past we haven't had such a structure and a standard, but now we actually are. And I actually went to a TNR and cat colony presentation at the Recreation Center with Corporation Counsel Kahan, where they actually had a couple of experts, and they actually sent us information to us about how the trapping is done. And so I just encourage us to kind of revisit that and kind of just, because it was pretty thorough. But I'm a little concerned about people self-deputizing themselves to just do this activity, period. I'm thankful for the activity because we need it, and they're helping our community and they're volunteers. So kudos to them. It's not about them. I'm not anti-volunteers. I just when people start to self-deputize on their own, that's where it gets a little messier, as we're seeing already. And my concern also is that with this particular law, do you really, as Stuart said, are we good? Are we going to take the option where we're actually creating a registry and a program and an application and a tracking for it, and or are we just going to partner with one organization that we trust and know, to do these services and educate the public to contact them solely if you want to get involved, or it's, just whichever way we go, it just has to be pretty much laid out.
I don't so much have an opinion as to whether we should have individuals or the group, because I think either way it can be functional. I still go back to my main concern being where the cats are in fact going to be. I think that in any form that we can in any way that we more formalize this process, it'll give us better control, because I don't think this is something it's not crime that's happening. It's not a disservice to the public. I think it's just something we need to have better oversight on for the purpose of controlling expenditures. But also, I do have some serious concerns about the locations of the cat houses, and that's most of my concern with people freelancing on this project. That even if we agree to be with the Cat Protection Council of Westchester, we've already seen from some dealings with them that when some people don't like how they do things, they splinter off and go on their own. And then does that then bring us back here again? And even if we, I hate to present problems without answers because it's not really my style, but even if we agree to go with an individualized program, what then guarantees, then we lose the ability to say, well, we have everybody that belongs to this one organization and they're sort of like-minded and have a similar strategy. Now we have people doing it all different ways, and I think that goes back to the problem of having cat houses in random places around the village.
Since you went to the training, I've only had it verbally described to me. When we talk about the cat houses, the shelters that I think of as the ones that like Annie maintains for the managed colonies that we have, some existing today on public property, which is another conversation that we've had, and I think probably need to finish having. But the actual trapping, I know there's more than one approach. Was the recommended approach that you learned about in the training, was that involving those shelters, which are like there's a variety of them, but they tend to be like those Rubbermaid boxes that are.
It's like a cage first.
Yeah, and then they.
You have to wait until the cat actually comes. It's the time I commend them for the patience.
It's not the regular shelters. No. It's not the shelters that they live in. It's a different thing that's set up for a short period of time, and you go to where the cats are, and you have a predictability to feeding them, and then one day they show up, and the predictable feeding place is now inside a cage, and now the people are watching, and they trap them in there, and then they take them away, and they get neutered and vaccinated. Am I correct in that understanding? So that's different than the shelters that we're talking about that are being kept long-term for housing the cats. So when we're talking about the shelters in different locations, that's a separate conversation.
Non-authorized shelters.
Yes. But the trapping could happen on public property. It could happen on private property.
The trapping could take anywhere from a matter of days to a matter of weeks. Could be a few weeks to trap a cat. Okay, so a matter of days? A matter of hours, okay. So that's a short-term project, but No, I understand. Well, that's what I'm saying. That whole routine, that could take a week or two. Yeah, okay. So we're talking for trapping, we're talking a matter of weeks. The separate conversation about cat houses, that could be years or potentially a decade.
Right. Okay.
No, I understand that. I do.
Right. I'm afraid to open it up into a big room conversation.
No,
people at home can't hear
that
me.
I understand. For every time they trap,
that's what I'm trying to make sure that we're distinguishing between the shelters for the long-term managed colonies that are approved and those that are not approved. That's a conversation. Just the trapping and neutering that has led to the unauthorized drop-offs at the SPCA they were being billed for, and figuring out a more dependable, structured way for that to happen going forward. That might happen on public property. That might happen on private property. It is a short-term thing. It's not the Rubbermaid shelters. It is a cage with feeding and monitoring, and that's the thing that we're talking about. Before that happens, as that's being initiated, or planned out, the volunteer, who is somebody that, however the registry sign-up approval training person happens, that person needs to contact animal control between 7 and 3 on Monday to Friday and say, this is my plan, it's at the corner of so-and-so, or it's in this location, I'm going to be setting it up on Friday morning, or whatever the case may be, so that it can be reviewed and checked out
Mhm.
by animal control. That's what we're talking about. The trapping itself might happen on a Saturday,
Right.
but the contact with animal control needs to happen Monday to Friday between 7 and 3.
Right. We
Is
don't.
that a
We
reasonable structure?
yeah. We
the way
don't
they
need
can
to be
work?
there at the time the cat is trapped. We simply need to say, if the volunteers say, "Look, here's where we're trapping," and that's why we said you call us ahead of time. We know that trapping often happens on the weekend because procedures are generally done on Mondays. So we don't need to be there at the time the cat is trapped. We need to go there and say, "Look, here's my location. This is how many cats are here." Generally, the cats are in the area. Sometimes you can even see them. Those are the cats we're going for. Great. Go ahead. Have at it. We then know how many cats to expect bills for, and this is how we can manage our budget.
Okay.
And the only authorized cat colony that we have now is by the Brendreth property, right?
Okay, so now you're going to the colony question, but
Yeah.
can we are we all cool on the trapping question, and is that accommodated for as we seem to have concluded tonight? Does the law as it's written set us up for success based on tonight's conversation, just with the trapping, putting aside the long-term shelters, just with the trapping?
I have to review it because it was not as much devoted to the trapping end of it as it was really the maintenance of the shelters and the feeding stations.
And it didn't really go into like the volunteers and prospective registry and
Well, correct.
So maybe we want to, as right now it says a particular organization, maybe we could loosen it to just be organization or individuals that are authorized by the village to participate in the trap, neuter, return program, and then we can figure out cat control protection of Westchester right now. 10 years from now, it's something different. There's, however, but we're looking. Then we have the animal control and police department has the authority to be able to determine who's, what kind of training are we looking for, what kind of regulations and guidelines should be used.
So I'm sorry, but Cat Protection Council does training, correct?
They would be able to help train the folks who do that. The answer to that is yes.
Yes. So if we authorize individuals, like why wouldn't we say, hey, if you want to do this, go through Cat Council? Like,
We absolutely can. We just don't need to see that in the law. Because the Cat Protection Council exists today in 2000.
I'm not saying necessarily the Cat Council, but why not an organization? Why are we?
Because my only concern is that there's people right now that don't work with them
Okay.
that are also trapping cats that have
Okay.
just popped up because this conversation's alerted people to the opportunity. So that was my. It's not.
Okay.
I don't have a position on it one way or another. I'm simply raising it as an idea.
I think that is absolutely the way to go. I just want the law to be accommodating to what animal control needs this year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, to determine
If the
what's
law
a
allows
good
for either way,
authorized
then if
person.
we need to change sometime along the way and add someone who's an individual that maybe goes off on
Yeah,
their
I
own,
wasn't.
it
I
would
was.
allow
I
for
wasn't
that.
okay because
I
I
just
wasn't
don't-
necessarily talking about the particular organization. My issue is that if trapping is supposed to be done a particular way, like and people are just plopping up,
Right.
doing their own thing.
can we have language that you can go to, I don't know how to say it, but organizations like them to get the training, but then again, I don't know if that's for us to actually check and verify your training, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so-
There could be somebody who's like, a veterinarian assistant who's lived in our community for a long time and absolutely knows how to handle this. And the police department says, we were very pleased to have you as a volunteer, and you are entirely capable of doing this. We want you to be able to participate.
We
I
just need
want
to know
give,
who it is.
I just want to give the discretion to the
Okay.
police department.
All right. Okay.
Yes.
But in all cases, they need to be registered. Their names have to be registered somewhere, no matter how they go about
In the
doing it.
vacant building registry, we'll put them
Oh,
as well.
please. Trustee Codman has been very, very patiently waiting to chime in.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Mr. Kahan's kind of recounting of the meeting that we had with the Cat Protection Council and the pretty detailed proposal that they provided, and I think that generally from the information that we got from that meeting is the removal of the cats from specific colonies. It doesn't necessarily work 100%. It's not a proven thing, but I also feel that budgetarily, I think we need to think about putting money towards this, because I think that having some of these cat shelters on public property is not appropriate, and we need to decide that in some cases we need to have a method of having that removal done, and we need to understand what the budgetary impact is going to be of that. it was a very good meeting, and I certainly learned a lot. And but I think there's a healthy balance here to be able to preserve, our need to not have these shelters on public property. But at the same time, if there's other existing situations that we can work through where people either are willing to have the shelters on their private property, that we could at least work through that in the short term. So I'm hoping that the board will see the wisdom of that. But I think there is a follow-up discussion we need to have about that proposal, and perhaps Stuart, you could provide the proposal that they gave to us. And,
I'll be happy to. Sure.
But that was a great meeting, and I certainly have sort of more of a global understanding of cat colonies and how they work and what happens, and the benefits of removing them and not removing them, but I think this is not something that's going to be. There's no silver bullet here. It's not going to go away in a year or 3 years or 5 years. I mean, it could take a decade to get these colonies really under control. And I think that's something that the board needs to understand, that this is not something that's just going to happen in a year. That all of a sudden the cats are going to go away. It just doesn't work that way. So these are free roaming animals on the planet, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And frankly, the educational part is so important that people just deciding to, discard their pet cat. I mean, the whole thing is just horrible in my mind, but that's what's happening. And people have to understand the economic cost and the social cost of that to village government. So now I'm all done now.
Well said.
I'm glad you brought up the education component, because that is really the
Yeah, I think
imperative.
that's
It's-
really
it's
important.
Changing
Yeah.
the cultural awareness in
Yeah.
the community.
We have to change behavior, really.
You're ready to move forward with
Yes.
local law 4 after following up on tonight's conversation.
Yes.
Next week, perhaps you think we'll be able to call for a public hearing?
I think you need to see it first before we
Okay.
call for public hearing. So
right.
let's,
So we'll review it again
on the
at
10th.
10:10, and then,
I think that would be best.
all right.
You want me to stay for dogs, or you?
Sure.
Like,
Let's see where this goes.
Not particularly, but here I am.
it's honest.
Okay, without further ado, we turn to other animals. The last time we talked about dog tethering, proposed local law 9, there had been reference to recently enacted statute in New Jersey. And I actually reviewed that and went over it. And the New Jersey statute does not mandate, first of all, that the owner or a person with the dog actually be with the dog when the dog is tethered. The requirement in Jersey is that you are not permitted to tether a dog outdoors between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. So essentially, for the remaining 18 hours, the dog can be outdoors. The exception in New Jersey is if the temperature is below 32, above 90, or if there are certain weather events. But interestingly enough, if the owner of the dog or a person in charge of the dog is outside with the dog in the bad weather, that's okay.
Sure.
I'm not exactly, but that's just fine.
So it's a supervised, or
Right. But interesting what Jersey says is, because Jersey also does this in the case of service dogs, so that if you're outside and you're supposed to be observing the dog, but you are blind, the requirement in Jersey is you actually have to be physically next to the dog at the time that you are actually outside. They went very, very specific. But as relates to us, other than the fact that the proposed local law is a 12-hour time frame when the dog can be tethered, we do not have a temperature requirement. We have a weather alert requirement in this proposal. But in many ways, it's similar to what is in New Jersey in terms of the length of the tether, the type of the tether. In New Jersey, you can't use it with dogs that are less than 4 months old. Under local law 9, it's 6 months old. So I understand what the arguments were before, but frankly, what local law 9 was, I think, answers all the questions that we had before. And as I said, the only difference really is in terms of actually putting, they have, as I said, they put a temperature on there. And not every municipality does that. Jersey has decided to do that. As I said, theirs is really extreme. They have a little bit of everything in here. But my own, whatever this board wants to do, fine with me. I think Local Law 9 answers the questions that really were presented in terms of, what we talked about before. The Jersey law does not, change my view on that, particularly because in Jersey you can actually keep the dog out longer, except that you can't keep it out at night. But it does not require that the owner actually be physically present when the dog is outside. They do require that in an adverse weather event, the dog has to be brought in within 30 minutes. But otherwise, it provides that there has to be certain shelter. We have that in this, which also follows New York's own agriculture and markets law, which does that and also talks about the breed of dog to be taken into consideration. And actually, Jersey says the same thing there, because in fact, in Jersey, other than with the temperature, there could be a circumstance where basically the breed of the dog simply is that dog should stay outside. And Jersey is pretty much okay with that, depending on the breed of the dog. So we have Local Law 9. We had a public hearing. I do not believe we ever formally closed that public hearing. At least that's my recollection. That was back on September 5. But that law is here, and unless the board wants to make additional changes, that's out there, and the public hearing, could be closed, and we can go forward, or whatever is the board's pleasure.
Comments?
I would be in favor of closing the public hearing.
Anyone else want to comment?
I'd like to hear Chief Sylvester's thoughts on the law, please.
I understand the push to pass an ordinance to address this somehow because there has been a lot of emotional debate on this. I'll just remind the board that this is a problem that's specifically related to one dog. We've had no complaints or issues with any other dog, and in fact, the dog in question has been documented by both the SPCA, or all of the SPCA, Humane Society, Animal Control Officer, and independent veterinarians, all as being well cared for and actually exceptionally cared for, is how some of them described it. All of the things that the dog is required to have are there, so I understand that sometimes there's a feeling that the ordinance isn't harmful, and that's fine. But I would just caution the board to keep in consideration that this ordinance is going to affect the entire community and not just one family. I can tell you that I drive past that dog every single day now, as a matter of, or almost every single day, or at least the house there as a matter of conduct. And it's very, very rare that the dog's outside. But I spoke to the family, and a lot of that is out of fear and concern because they've had regular visits from folks that sit outside their home and watch them. They've had confrontations with people sitting outside of their home. They've had, on at least one occasion, a note that they felt was threatening was left at their home. So, I've seen the dog. I've been there with the dog. The dog doesn't mind being outside. But again, I don't think this ordinance is about one dog. It's about 25,000 people and their pets. So, if there's other data I can provide, I'll be glad to do that.
What's the final number of hours outside? 12, right?
12.
12 hours, correct.
Corporation Counsel, thank you very much for.
No.
No. I don't think we can close it in the.
No, we can't close it now.
Right now.
No, we have to wait.
Would you just? We did not close it last week.
I don't believe it was closed because I think.
So then it would have been left open until the next work session.
Well, to the next
To the next legislative session. Thank you. So the next week, we will continue the public hearing on Local Law 9 about dog tethering, at which time we can just reflect back that you reviewed the New Jersey law, and while there are some distinctions in exactly how we've achieved those same, addressing those same concerns, we feel comfortable with the way that we've addressed it. Actually, is a less, a fewer number of hours consecutive that a dog might be kept outside, and I do prefer the way that. Sort of these arbitrary times of day and very specific temperatures, I think, are a little arbitrary, and I prefer the way that we have identified the period of time and extreme weather conditions being the parameters. And Trustee Chief Sylvester, thank you for acknowledging that this law is not about one family. It's about our whole community, whether it's one family that prompted the conversation. We have spent quite a bit of time. Corporation Council has spent an exhaustive amount of time learning about dog tethering laws now in 2 states. And I knew nothing about it before we started. I know a fair amount about it now. And generally, when you know better, you do better. And I think that you have crafted a law that is well-intended and will be enforced as necessary when something comes to our attention. And we have certainly raised public awareness about the importance of thoughtful and ethical care for your animals. And if there is a condition that ever is unsafe for an animal, this provides us with a clearer set of parameters of what is acceptable, and it makes it clear to dog owners if there's any question. So I look forward to this being on the public hearing for next week. It sounds like we're going to be able to close the public hearing and then put it on for a vote in the following legislative session. Sound good? Is that what I'm hearing? Thank you. You do not necessarily need to stay for any longer, but I did, while we're talking about local laws, local law 5.
5, you want me to?
Yeah, if you could just update it, because we had the draft version online for a while, and now we have the adopted version
Thank you, ma'am.
available for people. There
Sure.
were some differences.
I know that there were a few comments on social media about local law 5, and my apologies. What was on the site was the earliest version, the earliest iteration of local law 5. If you go now to the Corporation Council site, or you go into the village's website, all the local laws that were recently adopted by this board, both for the one-day cabaret licenses, for the parades, and most importantly for local law 5 are there. One of the comments that was forwarded to me was there was a concern that local law 5 provided that if someone is selling their home, they need to get a new certificate of occupancy or certificate of compliance. That was in an original version, but that is not actually in the local law. There are certificates or there are permit requirements for commercial businesses that are changing hands. That is something that is in the local law. But there is no provision in local law 5 relating to the sale of residential properties requiring any new certificate of occupancy or certificate of compliance. This is primarily related to commercial properties, vacant properties, some technical changes to the statute to include the position of Director of Code Enforcement to write violations and to issue certificates of occupancy, as well as certain presumptions that will be utilized in the Justice Court. But as to residential, there's a very limited amount that's in here, but absolutely nothing relating to the need for certificates of occupancy when you sell your house.
Just obviously, since that was an earlier draft, that is one of the considerations. It's something we've discussed in the past, and it's a provision that exists in Peekskill, and does it exist in Sleepy Hollow as well?
Peekskill, Sleepy Hollow, and Tarrytown.
So it is a consideration. It also would be an additional demand on resources in our code enforcement staff, and we are increasing our demands and code enforcement expectations for that department, as we are still working to get more people working in that department. So it is a consideration that we might look at again in the future and follow up with those municipalities and see how it's working for them. But right now we have significantly, substantively increased the code enforcement expectations and strengthened their ability to really improve the safety and quality of the buildings, and that's plenty of them to work with for now. And it was actually at the village manager's request that we do most but not all of the possible options initially, and we may revisit the certificate of occupancy going forward after if we feel that it may also be beneficial. But everything that we are moving forward with, I'm very, very pleased about. Thank you so much for your hard work on that, and thanks for clarifying the certificate of occupancy question. All right, Madam Manager.
This is something that we should talk about here. It's a negotiation.
It's not.
But I don't want to go over these numbers. I don't think that's fair.
Okay, so we can put that into. So forget what you do. No, you're right. You're right.
Executive session.
It's an internal discussion between two of us. You are correct. So you want to go
So
to the next
the
thing?
AT&T, we would like to move to an executive session because it is still in negotiations.
Got it.
And involves village property.
You got it?
So let's move on to budget meetings for 19. Back on September 17th, I sent you a notice asking if we could do the same dates as last year, which is Monday, November 12th. That would be an evening session, 7 to 9:30. Thursday, the 15th, would be an all-day session. And then Monday, the 19th, would be a 7 to 9:30 session. I don't have a list of all of the departments, but we would do it the same order that we did it last year. It seemed to work out really well. Now, I will say that originally in our schedule for the year, we were thinking about having the public hearing on November 21st, but that is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So we would like to have the public hearing on the 14th, which is on the same week that we're actually having the individual meetings. The reason we don't want to have it later is because it will impact our timing, because the board, in order for us to have that budget adopted and active for January 1, needs to adopt the budget the first meeting in December. So we would like to push the public hearing up to the 14th and continue our weekly meetings, or our 3 meetings for 3 days. And then I can do a summary report based on what all of you want changed for the presentation in December.
When
Um,
are you posting the preliminary one? There's like a formula here. Don't you post like a
It's
preliminary?
the manager's budget will be presented on the first Monday of November, which is November 7th.
Right.
So 11/7 is when it's presented to the public.
Right.
2 weeks later would be our normal legislative session, but that is Thanksgiving Eve.
And you're required by charter to have that public hearing at your second legislative session in the month of November. So what that would mean is you'd have to have it, if you're not going to do it the 21st, you'd make your 14th your second legislative session. Your charter though requires it. That's the schedule.
We have a work session on the 27th of November, but we don't have a work session scheduled the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That's a 5-week month.
Okay.
So
Wait, what are you talking about? November of 2018?
I have it listed. We don't have that Wednesday.
Which Wednesday?
There are only 4 Wednesdays in November.
7, 14, 21, 22.
So we have been in recent years taking off Thanksgiving Eve. Staff appreciates it. Many people who need to defrost their turkeys appreciate it. And it would be a terrible night to expect that the public is going to show up to give their feedback. I think people would feel that was, not really, not that many people show up, but we want them to know that they are welcome and we are interested in what they have to say. So what you're suggesting is if we make the 14th, which would be typically here for a work session, regardless of where it is, because I don't think there's going to be dozens of people showing up, we could still have it as a legislative session here. We could open up with a legislative session, basically a public hearing for the public to weigh in on the proposal, the manager's budget that was presented the week prior. That's what you're recommending. Keeping in mind that when the public weighs in, it doesn't matter if we've had our meetings or not. In fact, hearing from them during the course of our meetings may be valuable because what they're responding to is the manager's budget. Then we have all of our meetings and we hear from the public. And then it's the first week in December 5th, when we actually vote on our budget, correct?
So I would do a follow-up discussion before you actually take a vote that outlines the complete budget that you're voting on and outlines then any changes that were made to the first budget that I presented. Yes.
Request. Can we send out invites for the meeting dates for the budgets? Can we just
Calendar invites? No, he just means to help with our own calendaring, right?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
in other
Yeah,
words,
Jamie can do that, yeah.
I've already got them on Debbie's calendar.
No, but I'm just saying, send them to us so we can put them on our calendar because that's.
Well, I just need to hear the dates again. You want to do so that.
Yeah, I want to
Yeah,
understand what the dates
I
are
wrote it
so
down,
that I can.
erased everything.
Yeah, the 12th is an evening.
Okay, so
So
what is
the
that?
12th is
11?
a 7 to 9:30.
Veterans Day is observed on the 12th, so our office is closed that day.
Yeah, and I'm not going to. Well, I guess I'll be back. Let me see when I'm going to be. If I'm going to be back, I think I'm going to be away. that weekend.
Wednesday all day,
Thursday all day.
which
The
is
15th.
15th.
11:15. That's like 9 to 5.
That's the all day one, yeah. And then the last one is when?
Monday
17th.
the 19th.
Just
Hmm.
one minor thing. The 15th, I wrote down my notes 8 to 5. I couldn't be here at 8, but I could be here at 8:30.
Okay.
Is it normally 8 to 5 or 9 to 5?
We can do 8:30. We did 8 last
You did 8. Oh, you want to do it the last year because it worked, I guess. Okay.
So we either take a shorter breaks or end at 5:30 instead.
That's fine.
Child
I need my breaks. I mean, I'm gonna take a break regardless, but
Well, I mean, we schedule breaks here.
You're allowed to.
But like lunch was like an hour.
I think we gave ourselves
Oh,
an hour
okay.
lunch break.
All right,
We could
cool.
do
Yeah,
a
but we didn't do an hour. We ended up eating
No, and-
sandwiches.
Yeah,
oh, cool.
yeah. We
And
we
run on
Working
time.
no, we're being
Please.
8:30 is fine if that works out for everybody
And-
better. So
11
Monday is the 12th is Veterans Day. Is that it?
So you're closed. The village is closed today, right?
Right, but they still come
Yeah,
in
but,
for
but we
this.
can still meet here. It doesn't mean
Yeah,
we
and,
can't.
but they're the only people who usually work 7 to 9:30 p.m. too, so it's not.
Or we can do it on Tuesday.
All right, so really it's just the 3 days, the 12th, the 15th, and the 19th, correct?
Right.
Yeah, we usually have like one other evening for overflow and recap questions that we might want to block out.
Yeah, that was the Monday the 19th. That was the overflow day.
Oh, because you already cut us back last year.
It works really well.
Might have worked for you. It's a question of who it works for. I was happy.
So why?
I was
So
happy
why
that
can't
I
we
We'll
could
see
do
how it
that.
goes.
We can do Tuesday.
Why can't we do Tuesday the
13th.
13th?
Tuesday. Well, no, that would be a town legislative.
Right.
I could do that.
Yeah, I would prefer Tuesday.
Okay, dokie. So,
So
we're moving
are we
the 12th to
swapping
the
it out?
13th.
Couldn't
13, 15, 19.
So we're doing the 13th
13th
instead of the
19th.
12th?
Yeah. 13, 15,
No, us.
19.
So it's the 13th from 7 to 9:30.
Right.
Yeah.
13th from 7 to 9:30, 15th all day, 19th 7 to 9:30.
Okay. Got it.
And
So-
then if we need to have an additional day, we have time.
We can.
Oh,
week
we'll
after
just
Thanksgiving,
We'll
the
have
week before
lots
vote.
of time if we need additional time.
Well, we still have the week of the 26th if we needed to do an additional meeting with someone.
Well,
Because
so
open-ended
we don't want to
questions.
push it too far because it takes a long time for the finance department to put all the documents together. And get all the numbers so that we can publish them properly and I can do my review.
And also you guys need
I can't let them do
time.
it in just 2 days.
Right.
So we have to be mindful of that.
There are a lot of adjustments.
Well,
you
if right
gotta
now our
make.
last meeting is scheduled for Monday the 19th. Wow,
Right.
3 days
So
later
week
is
of
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
that's not
We
bad.
don't really need a week to put it together.
You don't
for
work
the-
the you don't work the day after Thanksgiving, right? You're closed.
No, it's
Right.
closed.
So there you go. It's not very much time.
If we do, we could squeeze it in on the 26th. But
We
it
had
would
to.
have to be really short. I mean, not a lot of stuff.
Well, the intention is that it will be nothing. The concern is just that if there's something that comes up,
Right.
we're
We
not
want-
giving ourselves a lot of cushion if we need to revisit something. That's the
Okay.
reason to have the cushion day that we hopefully can cancel.
7 to 9:30. 6:30 to 8:30. How about 6 o'clock?
Mondays are good for me.
What's happening
We
now?
could do six. We could do 6 to 8. We can do 6 to 8 on Monday. Oh no, it's not. It's not for good for people coming home from work.
No, it's not good for me.
That's right. You have a longer drive too.
Yeah, everybody has a regular job. They can't do that the day after
Okay.
Thanksgiving break. But
All right. Great.
Okay.
So the question was the public hearing on the 14th.
Correct.
And that's all.
I don't know. I'm just a little concerned because I need to.
So
Like-
what is your concern?
So I'm going to be pushing these public hearings and our budget meetings like a lot. That's like a lot. And I want people to really be able to see how the sausage is being made with the board during those meetings. And I don't want them to just comment on your budget. I want them to comment on the process and their reports. So that's just my concern.
Problem is
I mean-
the way the calendar works. out.
Yeah, no, I get that. I understand why. That's just,
Yeah.
a concern. I mean, we could film it, I guess, but it would still be after. So it won't really help them, right? Because the hearing would have been.
Last year was the first time that you presented your budget, and when you did it, when you laid it out, so for us, it'll be this year, Wednesday, November 11th. You presented you didn't just hand us a packet of papers, right? Was that the meeting where you actually described
Right, I
everything and
gave
did all the
you-
charts and graphs and
Right.
Public meeting though, right?
It was a public.
Yeah.
so was that that was the
Yeah,
public
that was-
hearing?
Public
That was a
hearing.
public hearing.
That was
I
good.
gave you summary documents and
Mhm.
I think you were given the whole thing via email so that you
Well,
could
it gets
look at
posted.
it.
That
But
PowerPoint,
the
right?
way I
That was the
presented it
coordinates.
was more summary and understandable by the
Yeah,
public.
that was good.
So the sequence of that, so if you hand us the numbers, the book of numbers on the first Wednesday, which would be the 7th, the following week, which would be when you were proposing to do the public presentation and the breakdown and the charts, and then following that would be the public hearing
No, no.
on the 14th.
It's public on the 7th. The 14th would be the public hearing where I would do an analysis of the budget that I'm presenting to all of you. And then starting on the 13th, which is the day before, and then after, we would have several hearings in here, not hearings, but meetings with the different department heads. And then you would give us direction on where you wanted to land.
But when are you doing the analysis and charts and graphs for the public?
Well, on the 14th to start, and then the final budget on the 5th. So I'll actually be doing it twice.
Okay.
So
I'll be doing it
upon
once with mine,
upon adoption, also.
and
okay.
then the second time with what all of you have agreed to put in there.
Does that reflect what you're hoping for?
It does. I just I want the public to really see the budget process, like with the department heads, like how it, like our discussions, what we say, what they say.
No, we've never.
I want to tape that, or I'll just stream it on my Facebook. But I do want to film that. I want it available for review. So yeah, that's my only thing, because that way they can go back, they can see what the board said, what the department said. So yeah.
So you're gonna stream that?
Yeah, I mean, we could put it on the village site, or we could make arrangements to have a camera here. I mean, but it should be definitely filmed. Absolutely, it's a public budget. So
Well, there are public meetings. That's why they're
well, those
publicly noticed. and we're talking
those
about it right now.
meetings are public. That's what I'm saying. So
They are public.
They are public.
Right. They
Oh,
can come
and
and
they can
sit
come.
and listen.
And they do. Some of them sit here.
right, but I mean, the 8 to 5, and I mean, this is just
Yeah, we're talking about, what's that, 8 hours, 10 and a half, 11, 13 hours, 15 and a half hours of us sitting in a room, going line by line with department heads about what their goals and initiatives are for the
Yeah.
coming year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. I want
Well, they
the
are
I
public,
want
so
the
it
public
doesn't
to no. I want them to. I mean, we already know. We already have an attendance issue when it comes to local government and people coming here. So I mean, unless it's a contentious issue or a fun issue that is bringing a lot of attention, but I want people to have the ability and the access to see how we work and how the budget was done. Period. I'm not gonna expect or rely that you have to be here presently while we, I'm not gonna force people to do that. My job is to make it as easy and as accessible to view how the process was from the start to the end. So I don't mind setting up a tripod and recording it and streaming it if we don't want to hire someone, but participatory budgeting is making sure that people have a full eye in the room at all times. So
I think that's unfortunate. I think that will really take away from our ability to ask stupid questions and look kind of dumb as we're asking questions of our department heads, because it's really a learning process for us, for all of us, and for the department heads. Sometimes we put them on the spot. I think it would be really unfortunate if we recorded it. I think people will be less candid.
that's your personal opinion and you're entitled to that, but this is
I'm not the only one that holds that opinion.
okay, well, it's my right to record and it's being recorded. So at this point, I need the public to know that we are part-time elected officials. And yes, it's a learning experience no matter what we do. But they need to know how we operate, especially how we budget their money for the year to come. And I don't see how us showing how their department heads that they pay for and their electeds that they elect and they pay for work.
Oh, absolutely. That's what we're doing here every single Wednesday.
I mean, for the budget, though. I mean, we could even go into why we don't even have a participatory budgeting or citizens advisory budget committee, right? I mean, we could really go into like how we operate budgets, but right now, I kind of just want to make sure that we record it so we could move forward on how to make that process better. But this is not a radical new idea. I mean, people record budget meetings all the time. It's a pretty simple
I
request.
think the reality is it's a public meeting. The other reality is the staff will not be candid when they're on camera. That is a fact of life. When you're managing people, and we're not some council people, we're not, this is a team effort. And when you manage a staff, when that people get very nervous, as it is when they stand up there. And my experience here is that we end up talking to the camera and not actually having conversation with each other. The truth is, it's a public hearing. I think it will make the staff less able to be truthful and honest with us about real issues. And it shouldn't be that way, but people are. You may be very comfortable speaking in front of a microphone, but most people really aren't. People can come here. There's daytime and there's 2 evenings. It goes on the website. It took me a long time to get used to speaking in front of a mic. I think the staff has already told the village manager how uncomfortable they are to come and speak in front of us. She's made that comment. So, I think when you are in a leadership position, you manage both the staff that you have a responsibility to, the public that you represent, who've given you the right to make decisions when they're in the room and when they're not in the room. It's a public meeting. Would I stop you from streaming it? Do I think more people will see it? I don't know. I mean, they might not. Will it make the conversation less candid? I'm like 99.9% sure. I think anytime you manage human beings, if you don't recognize that fact of life, then I think you're being highly naive. I think it's not a fair estimate for the staff. I think the village manager is the manager of the staff, has conveyed that to us, and I think it'll inhibit conversation. If you want to have that scenario, I'm not going to stop you. Do I think it's a healthy way to run a meeting? I don't. But you want to have a contentious conversation now about a public meeting. The truth is, it is a public meeting. And I don't think people don't show up because they're not involved. I think people don't show up because they're either working or not everyone is that interested in the budgets. They're interested in the outcome, that their taxes don't go up. They're interested whether we're buying 1 fire engine or 2. They're interested, they get all of that information. They have all our emails. They text us and they contact us. They're interested to see, what we're spending money on. And if they're interested in the process, I don't know why they wouldn't email us and say, I'm interested in the process. And some people, not a lot, have done that, said, I'd like to come. When are you going to be discussing X, Y, and Z? That, I think, actually would be more helpful, is to let people know in the 8 hours when in that window the topics that somebody might be interested in, because we have people sitting here like hours to hear the stuff. But, look, there's 5 of us here. I think it will inhibit conversation. I think it's unfortunate. And our staff is part of the people. So I'm going to put this on the public record that I think you're causing that. And I want our staff to know that I believe that this will make them, and I recognize that it will make them inhibited in their conversation, which I find to be unfortunate. But if you want to do it, go ahead and do it.
So I just want to say, Trustee Levin, you made a lot of statements. One, I cannot recall any time that our manager has actually said that our staff is uncomfortable being on camera, particularly prior to our own village manager. We used to have at least monthly, if not a couple of reports given by the staff. Now, particularly where I raise on the issues of actually taping budget meetings, I mean, we do have some conversations, but I do recall even in public meetings we've had candid conversations. For me, though, this is an issue of government, right? So having sat through 3 budget cycles, I definitely understand some of the concerns, but this is government, right? And so anytime that we are, a lot of people talk about transparency. A lot of people talk about transparency. If we're going to tape it, I would prefer, like, Trustee Herrera, you're more than welcome to tape it on your phone. But if we are going to tape it, I would prefer like real audio equipment, an actual tape where people can actually see the conversations that are having. Um, and to say that people won't be candid, maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I think it's our jobs as elected officials that if we feel that we're not getting the answers that we want, that we still have to press the issue. So I don't. People may feel uncomfortable, okay, but to say that department heads are going to be uncomfortable, and we've been told this several times, I'll go through the emails tonight. I bet you I won't find one. And at the end of the day, we're here to pass a budget. We're here to go line by line, and this is public information. So it's a budget, and it's a public meeting. So if 20 people or 30 people want to come in, they can come in. But if we want to say, hey, you know what, we're going to make sure for the record that anyone at any time can actually see how these budget meetings happen, it is what it is.
Yeah, you said the same thing, but she actually has said. So have you said to us that your department managers are uncomfortable?
I have said that.
Yes, thank you. So yes, in fact they are, and it is our job to manage. As I said, if you want to do it, it's a public meeting. It's always been a public meeting. There's no difference. Taping, not, it's a shame that we're getting down to a point we'll have to spend more money on it. All right. I mean, it's not a vote. It's
This is not the private sector. We don't decide when to open or close the door, we need to. I'm more troubled by the fact that you, as a village manager, and our half the board, maybe, or Mayor Garrity or Trustee Levin, feels that public employees that are in leadership positions do not feel comfortable speaking in public or on a recording. I mean, that's part of all those. Even when you apply, they're public roles, they're public officer roles in a way. So and we could discuss that if it's a personnel matter, training to make them comfortable in doing so. That has to be discussed. These are public departments, public department heads, taxpayer-funded roles. They have to be comfortable being on camera and being in front of the public. So I learned that today. So I'm glad I did, because I didn't realize that the people who were leading our departments were not comfortable doing that. That's a little disturbing, but we could work and find out on how to, this is the government.
What are you talking about? These are people who are hired experts in particular
In the public sector, in government.
Public sector, whether they're working for police, whether they're volunteers for the fire department, whether they're in public works, whether they're working for recreation. We do not have in their job description, you need to be comfortable justifying every single opinion you have about your job on camera in front of the public.
In government, you do. I mean, that's why
They have to be accountable for what they do. They have to be accountable for what they're asking for. That's not the same thing as enjoying candidly speaking on camera. That is not the same thing at all. They are accountable to us. They are accountable to Debbie. They are accountable to the public. Them being equally comfortable on camera and off camera, that is not part of the job description. If that's going to be something we require, we're going to have a lot of trouble hiring people. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't some expectation that they learn to be able to speak publicly, conduct themselves appropriately on television. Absolutely. What we are saying is we are doing a disservice to our ability to get candid, thorough, thoughtful conversation going with our department heads.
That's an opinion.
And your
That's an
feeling,
opinion.
no, it's actually just human nature. It is just simply human nature.
Subjective. Absolutely not. You can't say
No,
it's
it is
human,
not.
because my definition of human nature can be different than yours. You can't speak on what you think
Okay.
human nature is. Absolutely not. Unacceptable. No.
You know what? You can turn your phone on anytime you want to. The public could come in here and videotape
The
it.
fact that you
It's
want to,
absolutely true.
you don't want the public to see into
That
our
is
budget process is
absolutely
a
not
problem.
the case. That is
I don't
absolutely
understand.
not the
Videotape.
case.
What are you talking
Have
about?
you not heard anything that I have said tonight?
So what do you want to do? It's the budget meetings. Wow, is this close?
So I want to
Yeah.
just clarify one thing to make sure that we're both on the same page.
Sure.
They are comfortable speaking in public, but during the budget process, it's a whole different dynamic. And I think that what they're not comfortable with, and this was expressed to me as what has happened in the past, is this isn't just a dialogue, but it's a grilling. And it's unfair for an employee to be grilled in a public setting over things that has happened. So they're perfectly comfortable coming and saying, here's what I'm doing. That's not how the sessions have been handled in the past. And when there's an issue with an employee, or there's something that maybe a council member isn't comfortable with, that's why I like to know what it is so I can address it with them. I don't think those kind of things should be addressed in a public setting on a camera that can be replayed over and over and over again. So I just wanted to make sure that there's a difference between having a conversation and sharing historical things and then getting into a defensive mode in a public setting, which is very unfair for the employee, versus being able to come and speak in public, because they're all comfortable speaking in public. But this process of going through the budget is significantly different, and it's a lot of candid discussions. And that's what I had heard, and that's what I had shared with the board. They're not comfortable with that because they are all so afraid to come here because they're afraid they're going to get beat up over something. And I just don't think that that's something, that we're going to do in the future. And I just don't think that that's something that should lead down that path that we want publicized.
This is done throughout. This is done through municipalities throughout the entire county, the state. This is not under the fact that Austining is so behind in not actually sharing this is phenomenal. I found out when I missed a couple of meetings, the last budget.
You didn't attend any of the meetings for the last budget. In fact, you've never voted on a budget.
No. Debbie gave me a binder because I don't know who else was supposed to, but they didn't, and she gave me a schedule because no one invited me. But we can go into. I had the emails, by the way. So, but again, that's more of an administrative thing that happened here while I was not on the board at that time. So, if you want to discuss personnel and how that was dealt with onboarding new trustees, that's a conversation that can be had. But as far as this practice, it's not new. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Me being in the seat is uncomfortable. It's public government. And it's, at least for me, it's my job to make sure that the public really has their eyes on the board, on myself, on their people that they hire. And we have to, there's obviously, and I get it, but these are public employees. Doing a public budget with public money. And yes, the public does need to know what goes on. And that's why it's a public meeting in the first place. We have made a decision, and there's people on this board right now who want to continue making a decision to not let you see it unless you're here. And I just don't agree. This is, you would think we're talking about a new practice, but this is, this is creating accountability that could be sought and found. Could help us in researching past practices. This gives us more tools as a government, as a people, as a resident. So it's a no-brainer.
I just didn't want you to think that they were uncomfortable talking.
Thank you.
That's not the case.
Thank you.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I would. So, I guess having sat through, I guess this will be my 7th budget. I think there's a double-edged sword here. I mean, I think obviously budget meetings that I've been to obviously have been publicly noticed and people had the opportunity to come. But at the end of the day, because the cameras weren't on and because there was nobody in the room and nobody showed up, quite frankly, the interactions between supervisors and village trustees, tended to get pretty intense. And I think that is probably the real cause of your staff not wanting to come here. And I'm actually quite troubled by that. That we've created a budget environment in which You know, the supervisors of departments don't feel like they can be in front of a camera because there could be some serious criticism of their work performance. And listen, I've sat through those meetings and I've heard those conversations. I have to say that I personally haven't participated in some of those criticisms. I'd like to feel that I've been fair and that the questions that I've asked have been ones that could be asked and answered without an individual feeling uncomfortable. But I think this is a culture thing, and the fact that your staff doesn't feel like they can be in public for a budget meeting and meet with the trustees and not feel like they're going to take some heat, that's a problem. So for me, we need a culture in which village management and village managers feel like they can have a real and honest and safe conversation with electeds, and obviously that hasn't happened, and that's too bad. And I guess I'll just leave the comment at that. That's too bad. I think that's sad.
I would say that the best way to kind of change the culture is if our behavior as electeds haven't been the best, or there's been grilling, then maybe our behavior might change slightly when the camera's on, because that's what I'm hearing. So maybe the camera has to go on so that the community sees how we may conduct ourselves, how we choose to conduct ourselves.
I don't believe that you were suggesting that any elected officials were using foul language or being
No,
inappropriate or being
I mean,
unkind. It's just
No.
they were asking really pointed and challenging questions and putting staff members on the spot in a way that we don't typically do in this setting.
Yeah, I mean, generally those conversations, I mean, if in the past, if I was troubled by something that I heard within the context of a meeting, a public meeting for that matter, I wouldn't raise it in a public meeting. I'd have a sidebar meeting with that individual and say, gee, help me understand what's going on here, because, I heard some things in this public meeting that were of concern to me, and I think that's where those conversations have to happen. I think I would hope that the budget process will be substantive, that the individuals that manage those different departments would be able to defend their budget and talk about why they think it's important and everything else, and we can gather that up and listen to it and understand it. The criticism doesn't have to be real time. The feedback doesn't have to be real time, there's been some criticisms during previous budget meetings that I've witnessed that I haven't been all that proud of. I mean, but those decisions and those questions were asked by other individuals who are electeds, and I respect the office and I respect the seat, and it's their decision to conduct themselves in the way that they feel they need to get the job done of getting the budget done. So, I mean, listen, this whole board is a completely different 4 other people that I've sat with, so that's what that is.
I'm just lost. Where are we in this conversation? We have the dates. We're going to announce the dates. You're going to publish the stuff. And we're just going to, I mean, this is not a vote. So it's we'll have to, people do what they do. As far as I'm concerned, they can all show up and stream whatever they want. So
I just want to make one reminder to the board, if I might. I don't attend these except for my own department. My department is huge, as you all know. So it's,
hey,
but the point I want to make is, if you get into a matter of personnel, you need to be careful, because that could become an executive session matter. So if that happens, in Omar, for example, if you're streaming or if someone else is, the board at that point may well want to go into an exec if they have to, and then come out of it. I'm just.
Well, yeah, no, there's procedure. I mean, you're going to be here, right? So.
I just thought it was.
It's a non-issue when nobody's in the room, because there is a lot of talk about salary. And there was a lot of talk about, I would like to have another person in personnel, and then we say, tell us how you're going to justify that, how it's going to be.
That's different than a specific inquiry about a person.
Until we say, we don't think you're managing the staff you have well enough to justify you being able to have somebody else. So
Yeah, no, so we're gonna have to, I mean, with your guidance as we go on the meeting, you could, excuse me, Trustee Herrera, we actually have to go into executive session if you want to go into that or something like that. I kind of wish the discussion kind of turned as to why we don't want to fill these rooms for these discussions. I want them here. I want them to really see how the sausage is made from staff perspective, elected's perspective, together, how it comes together, and then why you present what you present at the end of it. That's really the goal here. I personally would prefer not to use my phone to stream, so if we can get an actual person to film, that would be ideal. I also want us to improve how we actually reach out to people regarding the budget. Do we do posters? Are they bilingual? Do we do email blast? Are we going to the schools? Are they sending it out on their e-blast? Just how we do events and promote those, the budget has to be, if you're not going to get the involvement we need if we don't actually reach out to people in a more effective way.
What else?
everyone's been heard. Somebody's going to stream unless the village is able to find somebody to videotape it. Debbie, you had a very different approach in other communities. This wasn't your approach, and I'll ask you about that on another occasion because maybe there's a more streamlined way to approach this because we probably have more time than necessary if we're not going to have any really constructive conversations here.
Okay, sounds great. Got the dates?
Yep.
I'll work with Jamie on getting it out, and I really did like the idea of publishing the agenda, like who's going to be when.
That'll be
We
great.
always do that, but yes, we
Thought
can do
was
that
a
again.
Great
It'd be
idea.
better if we tried to stay on the agenda, but yes, that would be.
Well, it at least gives it sort of
Yeah.
this person's first and then this person's second.
Yeah, I think that'll be helpful.
If they want to
people.
come for something later in the day, they'll
Right.
know they can come later or earlier or whatever.
I do want to stress though the importance of, I'll stream it if I have to on my phone, but we are a municipality that operates in a professional manner, and part of going through all this work and spirited conversation is making sure that people have access to the video after, right? Not everyone is on my Facebook or on the village Facebook, or so it's really important that it be put on YouTube afterwards, like we do all our meetings.
I concur with Trustee
The 8
Herrera.
hours is going to be, I think the full day one's going to be the one that's going to take them a long time to load up
Right.
and cost more.
Okay. Figured out.
Cost of transparency.
No, it's not transparency. It's been
transparency.
public forever. It's simply a different way of communicating.
When
And
you
you're going to have to budget, I think, for more of this also because you didn't budget for this. It's not a big cost, but it will be, it's something to just add, more to add.
Okay. The next thing we would like to have for executive session, which is the
Oh.
agreement.
We have to go
Motion
on.
to adjourn to executive session for matters of personnel and contract negotiations.
so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Please join us next week, whatever that is, October 3rd, at the Birdsall-Fagan Police Court facility for our legislative session. This meeting is adjourned to executive session.